The year was 1839. The place, a rainforest in the heart of Central America. An American explorer named John Lloyd Stevens found mention of an ancient city lost in the jungle. A Maya city called Copan. Stevens thought he knew where to find it. In his memoirs, he described the terrain they had to pass through.
The woods were of impenetrable thickness, and we could see nothing but the detestable path before us. Every step required care and great physical exertion, and I felt that our inglorious epitaph might well read, "Tossed over the head of a mule, brained by the trunk of a mahogany tree, and buried in the mud of Miko Mountain."
In the second month of their journey, Stevens and his party passed a village consisting of a few miserable thatched huts. The next morning, they found what they were looking for.
It lay before us like a shattered bark in the midst of the ocean, her masts gone, her crew perished, and none to tell whence she came, to whom she belonged, how long her voyage, what caused her destruction. Architecture, sculpture, and painting had flourished in this overgrown forest. Beauty, ambition, and glory had lived and passed away. Now all was mystery, dark, impenetrable mystery.
What Stevens had discovered were the remains of a Central American civilization which reached a peak of development during the 8th century AD, at a time when Europe was plunged into the so-called Dark Ages. The people who lived here were the Maya, masters of architecture, who built great cities without knowledge of metal, master astronomers who knew nothing of the wheel. Since Stevens' time, we have learned that Copan was the southernmost Maya city to develop. Located in a small valley near the modern border between Honduras and Guatemala, Copan was no less powerful than the great Maya cities of Tikal, Palenque, and Chichen Itza. What happened here? What kind of people created this magnificent city of stone, with its strange glyphs and carvings? How did they live? What sort of society evolved here? And, most puzzling of all, what kind of disaster finally drove the Copanecs from their home, but left their monumental works untouched? Archaeologist Bill Fash has spent 10 years trying to understand what went wrong.
This is clearly the archaeological jigsaw puzzle of greatest magnitude in the New World. There's nothing else that compares with it. The only problem is, with this jigsaw puzzle, we don't have the box top. We have to create the picture as we go along. You know, they often joke that archaeology is the most dusty of the disciplines. I don't believe that at all. It's a social science. It's something that we're doing to learn more about people, to learn more about what we do, why we do it, and why we don't do things we should do.
Although many questions about Copan remain to be answered, the story of its slow rise and sudden fall has started to take shape.
Viejo nen oni tata uban shekai utisen nen
The distant origins of Copan have a place in Maya legend.
El río Irán,
Speaking Chortí, a Mayan language, these men tell stories of a time when the woods were full of spirits, and a sacred horned serpent called Chichan broke an antler while carving out the Copan River. Many of the old stories contain echoes of a continuing struggle against the harsh, unpredictable environment of the rainforest. The forefathers of these men found more favorable conditions at a lazy bend on the Copan River.
We know that people came into this valley to settle and to live as of about 1100 BC. And there's really no problem explaining why they would come here. If you look at the environment of the surrounding region, this is the best place to come. It's got all this nice, fertile river bottom lands. It's got nice Piedmont zones with varied flora and fauna living there. And the river is a permanent source of water. So you've got basically everything that you need to be a maize farmer in 1000 BC.
The sleepy settlement grows slowly for over 1,000 years. Then, in the 4th century AD, the farmers fall under the rule of a series of local kings.
This is Altar Q, one of the finest monuments in Copan and probably the most special monument in Copan. This represents a king's list of all of the distinguished rulers of this ancient city. And each one of them sits on his own name glyph, so they're very easy to identify. The divine right of kings was the linchpin of the Maya system. The king was responsible for getting the word from God. The king was responsible for making sure that the system continued to work.
Under the rule of Copan's first 12 kings, the system apparently worked very well, as we are learning from the work of epigraphers like David Stewart. Born into a family of Maya experts, David is a specialist in glyph reading. He has been decoding these symbols carved in stone since he was 10.
To give you an idea how the Maya would have read something like this, I mean, here I'm giving you sort of rough English translations of these glyphs. This monument has some examples of glyphs that we can read phonetically, and one of them is the name of this king. We know, for instance, even from the Maya who live today, what for instance, the number 18, how that was said. That's Washaklahun is the word for 18. And so we can read his name as Washaklahun Ubak Awil. Was the name of the king of Copan. It's easier just to say 18 Rabbit.
Other important insights into Maya culture have been crystallized by art historian Linda Sheely. She believes that every carved rock gives testimony to the central role of the spirit world in Maya life.
This is a Stone Age culture. There is no metal in this culture. There are no huge beasts of burden. People do everything. So the most precious material that you can get in your world, period, anywhere, is going to be a rock of some sort.
And this is on the floor in the middle of the stairway.
At Copan, the layers of mystery are manifold. Below one temple lies another temple. Beneath that is a cache of sacred jades, buried at a dedication ceremony early in the city's history. Each stone is a charm, endowed with supernatural power.
In a world of a people like the Maya, the spiritual life that they live, the creatures that live in the underworld, what happens to you when you die is just as powerful and just as real as the invisible radiation of Chernobyl. And exactly the way we develop tools that helps us to work with the deadly energies of our world, they develop tools in their world to work and to control the deadly energies of their world, and these are them.
Through the reign of the first 12 kings, the deadly energies of drought and flood, hunger and disease are kept at bay. The forces that would eventually overwhelm Copan are building, but for the moment, they remain veiled, as king follows king in orderly succession.
Really a wild piece of jade, man.
David Stewart's recent discovery of these remarkable jades and flints confirms that impression of stability. They appear to be heirlooms of the royal family, passed from father to son, old king to new, symbols of Copan's continuing prosperity.
These are probably objects used by the king or the king's family. They're very, very ancient. It's an extraordinarily potent image for the Maya, and for our king to be wearing this, like this on his chest, is really a signal to his people that he is in extraordinary ritual context, and they should beware.
This is one of 3 eccentric flints that were found with the jades, actually just outside of that big pot. These represent really a fantastic offering. We've come to the conclusion that they are probably ceremonial spearheads. What we have on this flint is 7 different human faces in profile. So here's the main face. You can see his chin here, his 2 lips, and his nose, and then all of this is an elaborate headdress. But in the headdress are another set of faces. So there are 7 faces on this ceremonial spearhead. We wonder if maybe this means that the king had made 7 human captives for sacrifice during his lifetime. They are literally priceless objects. One expert in lithic technology who came through estimated that it would probably take about 500 hours to make one, but there's no one around today who can do it. I hope it fits.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, that's great.
Whoa. It's to the right scale.
Barbara Fash is the project artist. In addition to compiling a visual record of Copan's innumerable carvings, her experienced eye has been critical in joining one piece of the puzzle to the next. Slowly, a picture of Copan in its middle years begins to form.
You have just incredibly clear archaeological evidence for a population boom. And this is something that isn't just people reproducing themselves. Copan became a magnet for people from the surrounding region.
In the 7th century AD, the city reaches the peak of its power during the reign of the 12th king, Smoke Jaguar, and his son, a man called 18 Rabbit. Between them, they rule for over a century. It is a time of unprecedented prosperity. Skilled masons and architects erect temple after temple. Mathematicians and prophets, astronomers and musicians practice their trades. Art and commerce flourish.
We've got literally thousands of people. It's just sort of clutching and clawing to get into the Copan Valley because of the economic opportunities as well as the great shows that the kings were putting on. It's hard to imagine a more spectacular place than Copan on a Saturday night when 18 Rabbit's going to get up there and perform a rite for everybody.
And few rites are more central to Maya life than the ritual letting of the king's blood, an event which often takes place in full view of the assembled populace.
I'm sitting on the front of Temple 11 here. You can see from the size of the steps that they were made not only to allow you to climb to the top of the temple, but they're bleachers. This is a huge stage front for the most important rituals of Maya life. There would have been tens of thousands of people in the plaza out in front here, dancers up on the bleachers themselves, drums, chest-high drums and trumpets going, so that for days the rituals and the ceremonies would have filled this plaza full of people who were prepared to greet the gods. On the final day, when everyone was ready, the king would have walked straight out of that door up at the top. He would have been dressed in white clothes, which would have been stained red with the blood of sacrifice that he had taken to bring the gods to life. There are 10,000 people out there. They all know what's supposed to happen. It's worse than the Super Bowl, and it's most hysterical. and they start letting blood. They see it flowing. They throw the blood, the rubber, the copal, all of the gifts to the gods into the huge braziers. And when that smoke rose up, all of the people in the plaza would have seen their ancestors or the gods that they needed to talk to rising in those great smoke billows to the heavens above. The purpose of the ritual is to forge coherence in a society. Any society that exists anywhere in the world has got to have ways that allow the people who are part of it to understand who they are and how they belong to the greater society. This is the heart of Maya civilization, these great emotional cathartic rituals. If you participated in one, you never forgot it the rest of your life, and you knew that you were a part of Copan.
That was ancient Copan at the height of its glory. This is Copan today. In many ways, life here in the valley has not changed all that much. The men and women who inherited this land from the Maya use many of the same primitive farming methods. The marketplace is still a central fixture in the community's life. And today's Copanecs also share the old passion for religious ritual, especially when a natural disaster threatens, as it does on this St. Joseph's Day, when Copan finds itself in the third year of drought. The current dry spell has an unsettling parallel to ancient Copan. What's happening to the rainforest now has happened before. Hector Pastor has been warning local people for years that their farming practices are threatening the jungle. The clue to survival may lie in the past.
To the Maya, the forest was what to the child, to the embryo, the womb is. We emerged out of this. The whole civilization, the whole culture, everything came out of a place just like this. Everything depends on it. Every drop of rain that you would get around here depends on that forest. It's like a sponge. What you see here is the typical exploitation of the land that's been going on for maybe the past 2,500 to 3,000 years. It's called slash and burn agriculture, and what you see here is the very edge of the forest being cut down for growing corn and sugarcane and beans, which are the three main crops grown in the valley.
Because the land under the rainforest is poor in nutrients, it can only be worked for a few years. Then it is time to clear another patch of trees.
The result for the long term is imminent desertification and the end of the capability of this land to support life of any kind.
If Hector is right, what is happening in the valley today has implications that stretch far into the future and into the past. Bill Fash has discovered that by the time 18 Rabbit was king, the rainforest around Old Copan had begun to disappear as well.
You have to cut down the trees just to cook the food. You can't eat corn raw, you have to cook it. You have to cut down the trees to build all these new houses for all these new sons and daughters who are going off and building their own homes. You have to tear down more trees in order to produce the lime with which to coat all of these magnificent temples. You've also got serious erosion because remember, as the city's growing, it's eating up all the good land down at the bottom of the valley that was the whole reason people came to Copan in the first place.
As Copan grows, the destruction of the jungle accelerates. Then, in 737 AD, a political disaster. 18 Rabbit is captured by a rival and decapitated. His successor lasts only 9 years. The Copanecs respond to this crisis with a splurge of new construction. The rainforest retreats even further.
Their impressions of cause and effect were very different from ours. They said, well, you know, we're not doing our job, we're not appeasing the gods, we have to have more sacrifices, we have to build more temples.
One of the last temples they built contains the now famous hieroglyphic stairway. Carved on it is the longest text of Maya writing so far discovered.
Basically, we see this magnificent temple not just as a monument to the greatness of the Maya, but as a sort of rally cry for Copan when it's sort of on hard times. We know that at this point, a lot of people are sick out there, there's overcrowding, there's probably disease running rampant, and they basically have got to react quickly. They've got to come up with a solution that will be binding, that will be transcendental, and will hold everyone together. And that is why Temple 26 is so special, because it's an attempt to do just that. However, there is a sort of dark side to it too. These are two other objects that were found inside of the pot in the offering under the hieroglyphic stairway. We have a flint knife and a spiny oyster shell. The flint knife is exactly like those that we know were used by priests in human sacrifices. They would have used this to cut open the chest and extract a human heart. Inside of the spiny oyster shell, what we find, lo and behold, is a dried reddish-brown substance that looks for all in the world like blood.
But building more temples can't bring back the jungle, nor could a surge in human sacrifice. By the end of the 8th century, the time of Copan's last king, there is hardly a tree standing for 30 kilometers in any direction. The city itself begins to die.
Well, there were some people who were still trying to make a go of it, but the vast majority of the population said, oh, it would be madness to stay here. We no longer have a driving force. There's no justification for living here anymore. There's no land. All of our children are starving. Why should we stay here?
In search of food and fuel, the Maya begin to drift back to the jungle, now almost a day's walk away. Within a few short generations, it is over. Copan has become a ghost town.
As far as collapses of civilizations go, the classic Maya collapse is indeed a classic. They really did it to themselves. We know for a fact from our studies of pollen and our studies of erosion patterns and so forth that they completely devastated the environment that they lived in. Their whole reason for coming here was a wonderful, very rich alluvial environment, and they succeeded in destroying all of that as well as all of the forests that covered the hills, the mountains, and so forth, making it impossible for anyone to live here. It was a great civilization, one of the wonders of the ancient world. Tremendously creative people, absolutely stupefying works of art, of architecture. All lost, all completely wasted because they didn't respect the physical environment that they lived in.